It's day 3 of the UN Climate Change Conference in Madrid, Spain.
Environmental stakeholders and more than 50 world leaders are still brainstorming on how to save the planet. UN Secretary General Antonio Guterres says the planet is close to a point of no return, and he is urging all countries to cut pollutant emissions to combat climate change.
In the meantime, teenage climate change activist Greta Thunberg, who travels by sea to avoid pollution, has docked in Lisbon, Portugal, ahead of Friday's demonstration at the Climate Change Conference. Joining us now from Madrid, Spain, is the Deputy Campaigns Director, Corporate Accountability, CIRAM, Medusa Annan. Thank you for joining us on TVC Breakfast.
Thanks for having me.
All right, the United States and the rich countries of the global north have been blamed for the slow progress in the climate negotiation. Do you believe this?
Well, I think what we're seeing right now as Greta Thunberg and other young people around the world are taking to the streets is that fundamentally for the last 25 years, the UN talks have failed to deliver on the kind of transformative change that people around the world are seeing and demanding to address the climate crisis. And no doubt a big part of the reason is that global north countries, especially the United States, certainly in this moment, have been undermining the talks, and they've been doing so on behalf of some of the biggest polluters on the planet, corporations like Exxon, Shell, and Chevron that have known about the realities of the climate crisis for decades and have done everything in their power to mislead the public and to stop action.
So what are those real solutions? Because this question is quite important because activists from global south like Nigeria continue to speak against carbon markets, which the US and other Western nations put forward as solutions.
Yes, that's a really important point. And I think carbon markets, as many folks may or may not know if you're following the talks, are one of the major big ticket items. I think at the core of it, these markets are actually they're mechanisms that have been put forward by some of the biggest polluters like Exxon, Shell, and Chevron and their trade associations, the International Emissions Trading Association as one very particular one that pushes this agenda. And at the same time, we have to remember that around the world, there are very real solutions that actually address the crisis, that don't simply allow polluting corporations that have fueled the crisis to continue to pay to pollute and to do so. Instead, we need to advance real solutions like keeping fossil fuels in the ground, like agroecology and small-scale agriculture practices, and ultimately a just transition that is globally equitable off of a fossil fuel economy.
All right, we learned that your organization and other climate justice groups are demanding that big polluters pay for climate change impacts. How can they be held liable?
There's a lot of ways in which they can be held liable, and actually a number of these are already happening around the world. So we're seeing cities and states start to sue the fossil fuel industry. Just recently, Vanuatu reaffirmed its plans to sue the fossil fuel industry in industrialized nations. So we're already seeing that as the climate talks have unfortunately failed to deliver on the need for climate finance, which is a critical component of demands from global south countries and climate justice movements globally, including from the African continent, that people are taking not just to the streets, but they're also taking the fight directly to the fossil fuel industry and other big polluters. So we think this is the fundamentally just answer, because when we look at it, 100 corporations are responsible for 71% of historical emissions. So who else should be made to pay but these entities that have contributed overwhelmingly to and actively fuel the crisis through their economic and political power?
All right, so what must African delegates do to save their countries and the world in general?
I think, one, African delegates have a critical role to play in these talks. They represent over 54 countries within the African group of negotiators, are a critical voting bloc and powerful when they act together in unity. And they have actually been standing strong often against the bullying and the intimidation of the United States, especially in other global north countries. I would tell African delegates to continue that fight and to continue to stand strong in the face of this intimidation, because people in Africa, people in their countries, and people around the world even are with them and looking to them for political courage and leadership in a critical moment for the future of our planet and for our world today.
All right, thank you for speaking with us, Siriram. Thank you for your time.